we've been going through one another. And it says a guide for strengthening God-given relationships. But it gives a picture of climbing like Mount Everest. And, I begin to think about what God has done in our lives. And sometimes our lives, it feels like we're climbing Mount Everest, doesn't it? Some of our everyday life, it really feels like we're strenuous. Some days it just feels like we've got all kinds of things going on and the stresses of life. And so that being said, when it comes down to it, chapter 7 here, or lesson 7, we're comforting one another. And we're picking up, we talked about the imminent return of the Lord last week. And this week we're talking about this week we're talking about the empty promise of world power. The empty promise of world power. Now, I will tell you this. If you saw the debate between our former president and our current president, I'm going to be honest with you. No matter where you landed on that, if you saw it, I watched that, and I thought the most passion that I saw from either one of them was talking about golf. I was like, really? And there was no love lost between them. They did not walk out and shake hands. They did not look at each other. They walked out. And, in life, I really think sometimes in church we get like that. Sometimes we make it so about us. Now, I get it. It's a presidential debate. I get it. It's all about them. They're focusing on themselves. And I'm not pulling away from that. I will just say this. That's one of the reasons I never really ever desired in any part of my body to get into politics, because I don't want it to be about me, right? And when you're in politics, everything's about you. I mean, everything. It's really not about the people. It's about you and how you get things out. I would say there are a few candidates that has ever graced the political stage in any fashion that has truly been about the people. But I believe that they've made the biggest impacts, and we've seen that. Now, I don't want to make this about anything other than the Bible this morning, but I will tell you, I think a lot of times that's what happens in church. I believe it becomes about us. The pastor makes it about himself. Everything's about himself. The Sunday school teachers make it about themselves, or the people, whatever, whoever it is. I think that happens a lot to us, and God warns us against that, because, we're not to be focused on ourselves, we're to be focused on Him. And even when there's problems in the church, I do believe majority of the time we can work those out, but a lot of times people respond wrong. It's not that they're bad people, right? You've been in church and you've seen a lot of problems. And a lot of times and again, sometimes it is because they're bad people, don't get me wrong. But many times it's because they handle a situation wrong, they respond wrong, or whatever, and people get hurt. And so when we look at comforting one another, and we look at the promises that God has given us, understand that in this life, we've got to be careful not to make things about us. It's easy to do that. It's easy to get self-focused. But when we talk about the world power, there is definitely an empty promise there. Throughout the Word of God, the kings sometimes had empty promises. It was focused on them. They would go get taxes. But would their taxes always make it down to the roads and the stuff that they were designated for? No, a lot of times in years past, it was for the kingdom. It was for the king's doing. Do all of the taxes that we pay now go towards the stuff it's supposed to, the schools and the stuff? I would say probably not as much as you think. They call it pork, where there's a lot of pork inside of the bills, the tax bills and stuff that they pass. There's a lot of extra stuff. And it doesn't matter what the party is, everybody's always throwing extra stuff in there. It's not really about what you say. They just have a main title. But if you read it, there's always a bunch of extra junk in there, right? You see, when it comes to church, we need to keep the main thing the main thing. We need to keep our focus on God. We need to keep our focus on Him in everything that we do. Whether it's in our personal life or in our spiritual life, it doesn't matter what it is. We need to make it sure it's focused and based off of God. And that will help you in your life not get self-focused. So the empty promise of the world power, besides the conviction of the Lord's imminent return, the believer is also convicted of the empty promise of the world power. Verse 3 said, "For when they shall say peace and safety, and then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Understand that there is an empty promise in what is being delivered in our government today. When Christ takes the church away, the world leaders will say peace and safety. The Antichrist is going to act as though everything is fine. That's why we're going to see during the tribulation, we're going to see a period of peace. Because the Antichrist is going to come on the stage in real life. He's going to come on the stage, and he's going to be that world power that basically says, hey, I'm showing up, and I can make everybody calm down. Now, Trump is not the Antichrist, but one of the things that Trump said, one of the things that Trump said that reminded me of this was he said, 5 minutes after I'm reelected, I'll have peace between Russia and the Palestinians. And listen, I believe that he believes that he can do that, and maybe he can, maybe he can't. I don't know. It's not my area. But I will tell you this, that it's important to understand there's only going to be one true peacekeeper that will truly bring peace, and that is God. Go ahead.
You meant Israel.
Or Israel, I'm sorry. What did I say?
What he actually said was, well, I don't know, you may have said that, but I didn't know what he was talking about. What I saw him talk about is he said he was going to, before he actually took office in January, in November, in January, he was going to make peace between Russia and
Ukraine, yeah. Yeah, I meant Israel and Gaza, but right. And and listen. There are things that we can do, as a country, really we are a superpower still, but if we continue going down the path that we're going down right now, that won't be very long. I believe that we as a nation are turning our back on God as a whole, and we are going our own direction. And if we continue to do that from the government level, from the culture level, and from a personal level, God will pull His hand of protection off of this country. And when He does, God help us all. Yeah, I saw that the other day. Oklahoma, they're requiring the Bible to be taught back in the schools. Louisiana has it. When you pull God out of your everyday life and out of your children's life, God only goes so far. What happened with Sodom and Gomorrah? See, we always attribute it just to homosexuality, but Sodom and Gomorrah was living in wickedness, period. And God pulled His hand of protection off of them, and He said, I'm going to destroy, because they're publicly mocking me, they're publicly living in sin. And listen, it's not that God doesn't love the sinner. He does. He's their creator. God loves the sinner. He just doesn't love the sin. He hates the sin. He hates what they're doing. And the same thing goes with us. And in God's eyes, sin is sin. So understand that when people are publicly mocking, this is why Rome fell. Rome fell. Now, Rome is still there today, right? But it was like the U.S. It was the world superpower. All the countries, they abided by what Rome passed. But you got to understand that Rome fell because of the sin that was running rampant. They got to a point where it was just wickedness everywhere you walked. But listen, God will not stand for that. He will allow it to happen for a period of time. But the same thing is happening in America today. And so that's one of the reasons that I don't believe that America is named in the Bible. I believe that we may still be here. Don't get me wrong. I don't necessarily think that we'll be gone. But I think that we will have diminished our influence in the world, and because God is going to take his hand of protection off of this country. And as long as we are focused on God and we are treating this country in a manner just like what we were just talking about with children and having the Bible in school and teaching, listen, God will bless that effort. He will bless those states. But to look at the shape of the states that have completely taken their eyes off of God. Look at the shape of California. Everybody's moving out of it. Look at Chicago. Look at Detroit. I mean, look at these cities that have openly said, hey, we're just going to do what we want to do, and shown their wickedness. What has God done, man? Everybody's just moved away. Why? Because, and I believe that's what's going to happen in America. I believe that when God takes his hand of protection off, you will know it. I don't believe he's taken it off yet, because we're still here. And I believe that God is still protecting us in many ways. But the wickedness will completely run rampant. So I believe there's still efforts going forward. And listen, as long as we're trying as a country to continue to repair this country. What does the verse say? If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and heal their land. Understand that it is going to take God showing up. So when we go back to the Antichrist, remember that there's coming a day when he's going to show up on this earth as a person. And he may already be here. But I'm not talking about his messengers. I'm not talking about his imps and demons. I'm not talking about the stuff that he has used, the people, the beings that he has used from the time that he was cast and with his angels down to this earth. I'm talking about he himself is going to come on the scene. And when he comes on the scene, he's going to try to bring peace, and he will accomplish that. But it's going to be a temporary distraction is really all it's going to be. You ever see whenever a magician, you ever seen the cup trick where they put the ball under the trip and they go around? Well, what do they usually do? They sit there and they're going around and they start talking to you to distract your mind. You're watching, and they're moving it around and they're moving it around and they're trying to like distract you. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, what is that? You know, and it'll do around or whatever. I've even seen them where they're doing it next to the edge of a table and it'll drop off, right? They'll just go quickly, and it's all about distraction. That's exactly what the devil's going to do. He's going to distract. But after that first 3.5 years, what's going to take place is a whole nother set of events. And then his true colors will come out. You remember, what was his name down in Texas? The guy, not the Kool-Aid guy that had everybody drink the Kool-Aid. That was Jones, was the Kool-Aid. Is it Koresh? The one down in David Koresh. That was one of his things. I mean, he was living in wickedness. There was nothing there according to the Bible, okay? I mean, he had many wives. He had many children out of wedlock. I mean, there was all kinds of wickedness going down there. But he was confusing people. He was brainwashing people. There's going to be more of that. Understand that that's this stuff. The Halley's Comet, remember the Halley's Comet? Everybody came in and drank poison and died thinking they're going to go to heaven and all this stuff. Just understand that the devil's always going to try to come on the scenes through people, but one day he will. And he'll have the ultimate distraction. Now, I don't believe it will be here, because I believe that the rapture is going to take place prior. That's going to be what sets the tribulation in motion. But all that being said, we've got to be careful. We've got to make sure that we are watching, protecting your kids. Don't just send your kids off with anybody and everybody. Know who even right now, Kyle's 19, he'll be 20 in July. I still want to know where my son's at. And when he moves out, I won't necessarily want to know where he's at every second. And I don't now. He's old enough where he's kind of on his own, but I want him to let me know where he's at. Oh, he's already tagged. Yeah. Live 360. All my kids have Live 360. And listen, you know, if I can't find where they're at, I want to know. He was on his way home from camp last night. And I told him, I said, you know, let me know. But I want to know. You know why? It's not a privacy thing. It's not. I'll be honest with you, it's not. It's a loving thing. Because I make sure that my kids, I'd rather be the mean guy right now that says, hey, I don't want you going to that person's house, or I don't want you going to that area, or I don't want you doing this or doing that. I'd rather be the one that says that now than to have to pull them out of jail or to have to pull them out of the gutter because they got hooked on something or because they got involved in something. Listen, just understand, do what you can. It doesn't mean your kids are going to turn out perfect. Some of the greatest families I've ever seen, they've had kids come out and get stuck in the muck and the mire. I mean, sin, the devil's going to try to grab anybody and everybody. He's going to try to ruin the testimony of families, of people. It's okay. It's okay. When those things happen, seek God's face. But my point is that, you know, when we go through life, the devil's always trying to tear your family down. He is never going to bring good news. And even when he brings peace upon this earth, it is a trick. Because it's not true peace. No, it's just to set in the stage for everybody to have their eyes on him who is left on this earth. And is setting the stage for the second coming of Christ whenever he brings back a whole two armies. One's going to be us, and the other is going to be the angels. And I'll be honest with you, the angels are coming first. There won't be nothing for us to do. I think we'll just be the observers. But that second coming of Christ, when we're watching this scene, we're going to sit back and watch what God is cleansing the earth with his host of angel army. And I'm telling you, it's going to be something that we can't even ever imagine. So we see that there's a believer's conviction. And understand that great empires, I meant to say this earlier, great empires have failed. The Egyptian Empire, they were a great nation between 1570 and 1070 BC, according to history. The Syrian army, 911 through 609 BC. The Babylonians, with Nebuchadnezzar, if you remember, 605 to 539 BC. The Persian army, 539 to 330 BC. The Greeks, Alexander the Great, you remember him from history, 330 to 63 BC. Romans, the Roman Empire, 63 BC, also to 476 AD. They had a long reign there. Not as long as the Egyptians. The Mongolians, the Genghis Khan, remember his name? 1206 to 1360 AD. The Turkish people from 1299 to 1923 AD. Turkey was a great power. British, 1500 to 1960 AD. The French, Napoleon, remember him? Not Napoleon Dynamite, but Napoleon, 1804 to 1815 AD. They had a great push and that was whenever they began to, if you remember, even not the Civil War, but the World War I, when they became, I'm getting my wars mixed up. When they came over, World War I, whenever they began to try to attack America. And then also Austria and Hungarian, their reign was 1867 to 1918. Now, some of these you won't necessarily find in all of the history books, but understand that world leaders are still saying today, peace and safety. They are still preaching, I will try to bring peace and safety. And that's what we heard even this last week. So we have the believer's conviction, but we also have the believer's caution. Number 2 there, the believer's caution. The Bible is clear that believers will not be part of the coming destruction. God tells the church of Philadelphia in Revelations 3:10 that because they have kept His word, He will preserve them for the wrath to come. It says in Revelation 3:10, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I also will keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. So while we as believers are spared from the wrath that is to come, we need to be ready for His return. And that is the return of Jesus Christ. So if you're not saved, you're not ready, plain and simple. So when the rapture takes place, again, that is not the second coming of Christ. That is His return. And as a kid, I never understood the difference between them. But the second coming of Christ is going to be for a cleansing. The first return of Christ is going to be to take His saints home. The dead in Christ shall rise first, and all that remain, which are us today. So if Jesus Christ comes back today, He's going to take all the saints home. So understand that there's coming in a set of events that is going to, and it's coming soon, that is going to rewrite history. And listen, they can try to take all the history out of the history books. They can try to pretend it never happened, but I'm telling you, there's coming a day that they cannot remove. They cannot remove the fact that Jesus Christ died on the cross of Calvary. They'll never remove that. They'll never remove the Bible from this earth. God, He promised that He will protect this word. He will keep it in print, and He will keep it in circulation for the rest of this time. But I'm telling you, there's coming a day when God is going to come back and cleanse this earth. But we're not going to be here. If you're saved, you're not going to be here. So the believers, they had caution here, and they would need to be awake, to awake. In verses 6 and 7, it says, God instructs us to remain alert. The word sleep in verse 6 means to drop off, to sleep, to fall asleep, to yield to the sloth. Now, sometimes the Bible talks about somebody sleeping, they're talking about they're dead. Okay, it's death. But in this case, it's talking about sleeping. It's you're sleeping in your pew. You're not really listening. You're not really being part of it. And when we are asleep, we are not aware of our surroundings. Believers are instructed to watch or to be vigilant, to keep awake for the Lord's return. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 34 says, awake to righteousness and sin not, for some have not the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. This is important. Paul wanted them to understand, the church of Corinth, to understand, listen, don't be sleeping. Pay attention to what the preacher's saying. And Timothy, Paul encouraged the church to be paying attention to Timothy. He was a young preacher. Pay attention to the preacher. Pay attention to God's word. Make sure that what you are doing is listening to God's calling. God calls on us to awake to righteousness. Mark chapter 13 and verse 34 to 36 says, for the Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey, who left his house and gave authority to his servants, and to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, or at midnight, or at the cock crowing, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. Well, I think it's important that we make sure that we are awake. We're going to stop there for